Hey, folks. Here we are today, and Mike is with us, Mike Heaton from NewBoCo, the development director. And last week, he called me up and proposed something very, very exciting. Now, you have an email from me, you have a summary from Mike, but I thought it would be important to get on video here and just have Mike have you explain a little bit more in more detail so that everyone can understand exactly how significant this might be and how they might interact with it. So over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. I'm really excited. There's no other way to put this. We at NewBoCo, which if you don't know, NewBoCo is a tech education, innovation, and entrepreneurial organization, nonprofit organization based out of Cedar Rapids, but providing services to the entire state of Iowa. And the idea is to help build entrepreneurial ecosystems. We have systems in place, infrastructures in place all across our country that helps businesses grow, right? And certain industries do really well, other industries don't have the support they need. And what we found in, say, Silicon Valley, when you have a huge infrastructure and ecosystem supporting tech, then it tends to produce tech companies, right? If you have high-speed internet and all those kind of things. One of the beauties of what we've been talking about here in Southeast Iowa with this regional food web is how do we put an ecosystem into place that supports your organic producers, that supports your processors, your niche market producers, your distribution companies that get products to market here in the region, and even a network of purchasers and so on. And there's that whole system that works together to create what we call an ecosystem around food. And we've had that in the past here in Iowa. It's definitely something that's been very, we have to eat, right? And so there is a system in place, but that system over the last few years has migrated out of Iowa and to where we're now dependent on food from other places. And most of our production is feed for animals and fuel for cars, ethanol and so on, and for other machinery, which this whole conversation isn't a criticism of that. That's a big part of our economy. I know people listening to this video will be like, oh, we need to replace that with this. What we're interested with NewBoCo is saying, hey, why are we importing all of our food goods? Why can't that be something we do as well here in Southeast Iowa? In addition to our incredible ag industry that we have that has some tweaks that could be made, don't get me wrong, but we have the skill set around ag. So why not invest in our people here, help grow our economies here, producing food as well? But that takes a whole infrastructure. It takes a lot of businesses that are building out their distribution networks, that are building out their processing centers, that are building out their little small farms, that they're growing potatoes on, for all we know, whatever the demand is within the market that we need. And unless you have that infrastructure to support those growers, those producers, those processors, those distributors, those restaurants that are selling those goods, purchasing and selling those goods to customers, if you don't have the ecosystem, it won't happen. And the large scale producers or distributors from outside of the state are going to continue to sell us their products. And we're not going to make any money off that, despite the fact that we have the talent to do that and the skill set to do that. So that's the idea, is how do we build out that ecosystem? And it just so happens that NewBoCo's specialty is building out entrepreneurial ecosystems. It's making sure.
How convenient, right?
That makes sense. Yeah, go figure, right?
Go
Which
figure.
I think is pretty much why you brought us in the first place.
Pretty much.
So we just so happened. So when you first talked to me about all this, I wrote out a grant to the Small Business Administration. It's called their Growth Accelerator Grant, and it targets a specific industry in a region with the idea, especially around STEM, and agriculture is obviously one of the oldest and most important STEM fields with science. And obviously ag is huge in tech now as well, in terms of using technology for production, distribution, et cetera. Building out an ecosystem around ag in Southeast Iowa is how I wrote the grant, based on my conversations with you and others. And we got awarded it. We were one of, I think, 60 out of 300 some entities across the United States that got awarded a $50,000 grant. And with the intent that we're going to help build out this ecosystem. What that looks like, well, two pieces. We'll talk about what that looks like here in a second. But before that, the beauty of it is it comes with incentives. So if we're able to build partners across the region, this could be the Fairfield Collab, offering space for entrepreneurs to meet, right? And they sign off saying, we'll offer space for this initiative to build out this food web. It could be a business one to donate toward the cause. It can be producers or purchasers saying, we're willing to, as part of this initiative, we're willing to build up to ensuring that 35% of the food we sell in our restaurant comes from local sources. And they're signing on that. There's partnerships across the region. It's chambers, it's Main Streets, entities, EDOs, we call them, economic development organizations. If we get enough partners that are willing to come together to build out this ecosystem, the SBA will give us another $150,000 this year, which is really exciting. So that's one of the goals we're focusing on right now with NewBoCo, is working across the region, the Southeast Iowa region, to build those partnerships up, to help with matching dollars, to get all these partnerships we just described. And if we do that in a month, we're going to find out, we're going to apply for the other 150, and we should get it based on if we do the work they told us we get it, kind of thing, right? If we have that and it is funded properly, it allows us to come down and start filling in the gaps within the ecosystem. First, we're going to look at an assessment that we talked about during our gathering a couple months ago there in Fairfield, an assessment of what are our assets, what are our gaps across the region in terms of a regional food web, what processors do we have here in the region, what producers do we have, is there a way to, do we need to scale some of them, do we need to create whole new markets that don't currently exist, right? And all those pieces, all that data being collected to know exactly what's needed to create the system. So we want to help with that. We have experts that can do that. And then the next step is then saying, okay, here are the gaps. This is what we need. And they need to be surrounded with resources to be able to be either be created, to pivot, or to grow. So like, for instance, Breadtopia is a fantastic company based out of Fairfield, and they incubate other companies within it. That's a massive resource that we would identify with the assessment, right? And it just may so happen that there is a demand for baked goods that is not being met across the region. Maybe we work with Breadtopia to find funding from one source to be able to help one of their incubators to pivot and start producing more tortas for Mexican restaurants in the region, because there's a market for it, right? And so we come in with our technical assistance, we find funding streams for that company to do that within Breadtopia, and suddenly now we have a market of locally produced tortas for all the Mexican restaurants across Southeast Iowa, instead of those restaurants having to buy tortas from California, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So by the time it even gets to you, it's 2 weeks old bread and it's not fresh. And more importantly, that Mexican restaurant that's purchasing that money then stays in the region and it circulates. And then that bread maker is suddenly going out to eat at the broth lab in Fairfield, or they're coming over to the Grange here in Mount Pleasant to get out of town, or whatever it is, right? They're spending money down by the river in Burlington. Right. And suddenly that money cycles, right? And then suddenly people are buying new houses, or you're having more people move to the region, our schools are having more funding because of appropriations, our hospitals start to grow instead of decline. It's that whole, if you build up a good entrepreneurial ecosystem around a thriving industry, which ag is in Southeast Iowa, and those niche ag pieces, the food web industry in Southeast Iowa is just primed for growth here, and the market's there. So all that said, we're going to be putting those pieces in place to help that happen, is the hope. And what we're trying to build out too is we're in a space now where the technology now exists for us to network well with producers and distributors and processors and purchasers in a way that we couldn't 20 years ago. But whether or not it's like an app where you just hit a button and order your food and reorder your food like we do through Walmarts and so on right now, there's no reason we can't do that locally. There's no reason we can't build out a system that creates markets that weren't possible even 10, 20 years ago. But like you said, as we build that out, there has to be a really strong emphasis on that regionalization piece. Because there is, you get too big, you do become like the other guys. And then our rural communities get ignored again, right? And if you get too small, you don't really have the impact or network you need to truly provide food to all these purchasers and cafeterias and hospitals and schools that we need to be able to do to keep that money cycling through the community. So there's this balance that is really community centric and regional centric. That's really, it's not just a single bottom line of how much money can we make, like a lot of large companies have. it has that quadruple bottom line, right? A people, place, purpose, and I think there's one other one, and I'm blanking on what it is. There's another P in there somewhere, but
No,
that has that community centric piece while allowing and profit. That's always one of them, right? People,
yep.
place, purpose, and profit. It's very doable to have that profit and still have a people centric, a place centric, and a purpose driven business, which that's what this food web would be part of, and that'd be a fantastic example for other regions across the country to be able to pull off. That's the idea, at least. So we'll see how that goes.
That, and I think there's every reason to believe we can do it. Profit is important. It just can't be the raison d'etre.
Exactly.
It's got to be a design criteria. And if you don't make profit, you can't grow. You don't have any blood, in your body. Yep. That can't be the only reason. The reason needs to be the very purpose of the entities, the purpose of the business, the purpose of the web, which is human nutrition and human happiness and health and economic vitality, spread
community vitality, the whole 9 yards. Yeah. And Bob, I do apologize. My noon meeting, lunch meeting just arrived, so I do need to head out on you. I apologize.
Well, no, this is plenty enough. But Mike, thank you very much. This is a big old vision. And folks, I'll be putting this out to everyone in our food web working group and beyond that. And Mike, thank you very much. This is pretty darn exciting.
It's a pleasure as always, Bob. Thank you.